Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is MD from Observemedia, and we're going to start our rundown here of Marvel Cinematic Universe Phase 2. Now we're going to start off with right after the Avengers. We're going to start off with Iron Man 3. Now Iron Man 3 starts off with a flashback of Y2K where Tony ends up crossing Aldrich Killian after an elevator speech to sleep with Maya Hansen. Back in present day, Tony starts messing with some tech that allows his suit to fly towards his body, but it needs some work. On the news, we see a broadcast from the Mandarin, who is a terrorist and is teaching America lessons. The president responds with painting Rhodes' suit red, white, and blue and calling him the Iron Patriot. Tony has a severe anxiety attack. This is a thing that occurs throughout the film. Aldrich Killian shows up at Pepper's office to pitch her the idea of Extremist and his company AIM. Extremist is a system that connects with someone's brain and increases their genetic potential. Pepper tells him no and he leaves. Upon returning home, Tony tells Pepper that New York, what happened in the Avengers, messed him up mentally. Later that night, he has a nightmare. Happy decides to follow Killian's partner in an attempt to stop them. A man using the extremist power explodes and hospitalizes Happy. Tony calls out the Mandarin, gives him his home address, and Tony begins his journey to be Batman and activates his detective mode to try and figure out what happened to Happy. As Maya arrives, Pepper is leaving. Killian's guy comes and attacks Tony's house. Tony saves Pepper and Maya, but then fakes his own death. Maya tells Pepper she believes Killian is working for the Mandarin. Tony makes his way to Tennessee where he investigates a similar bombing. Killian's men begin to attack Tony. Tony is able to defeat both of them using clever means. However, one of Killian's men survives. After the president sends the Iron Patriot to take out the Mandarin, we find out that AIM is actually behind all of this. One of Killian's men captures the Iron Patriot, and that Maya is actually working with Killian to get Tony Stark's funding. Killian then kidnaps Pepper. Tony goes full Batman as he infiltrates the Mandarin's house. Tony interrogates the Mandarin and finds out that he's just an actor and that Killian is the secret mastermind. Killian's man captures Tony. Killian shows Tony that he has injected Pepper with the extremist serum. Maya threatens to kill herself if Killian doesn't stop hurting them, so Killian just shoots Maya. Killian then forces Rhodes out of his suit, and Tony, using the new technology, gets his suit back. Rhodes escapes and meets up with Tony. They steal the Mandarin speedboat as the Iron Patriot infiltrates the president's plane and blows a hole through the plane. Tony ends up saving the people, but the suit is destroyed. Pepper survives the extremist injection, and the president shows up in the Iron Patriot suit. Tony summons all of the Iron Man suits from his house and starts a war with the extremists. During the fight, this frees Pepper. Rhodes saves the president and regains his suit. Tony tries to save Pepper, but she falls into the flames. However, she doesn't stay gone for long when she shows back up and saves Tony and defeats Killian. Then Tony blows up all of his suits, takes extremists out of Pepper and the shrapnel out of himself. Happy wakes up. There is a nice little end credit scene with Banner and Tony that isn't overly important, just pretty much comedic. Alright, now we move on to Thor the Dark World. We are introduced to the Dark Elves, an ancient race that waged war against Odin's father many, many years ago. Malekith, the leader of them, had a plan to shroud the Nine Realms in darkness using the ether. Asgard stopped them and Malekith went into hiding. Back in the present day, Loki is being tried for his crimes that happened in Avengers 1. Sentenced to the dungeons for the rest of his life, upon returning, Odin tells Thor that he is ready for the throne now, that the Nine Realms are safe, but Thor's mind lies elsewhere. Back on Earth, we see Jane Foster trying to locate Eric Selvig after a rather revealing display in London. Jane stumbles upon a portal that leads her to where the ether was hidden. This wakes up Malekith and his elves from their slumber. Upon returning to Earth, Thor comes to visit Jane to make sure that she is okay. When he sees that the ether has infected Jane, he takes her back to Asgard. We learn that the ether is a fluid substance that transforms matter into dark matter, and it does this by stealing the power from living beings, and cannot be extracted from Jane. While Thor explains the convergence to Jane, a cursed soldier enters Asgard and breaks out everyone in the prison except for Loki, who aids him in finding the ether. Malekith wages a full-on invasion of Asgard. Looking for Jane, he kills Thor's mother and barely escapes. Upon planning for Malekith's second assault, Thor notices that Odin is no longer of sound mind due to the death of his queen. Thor takes it upon himself to free Loki and Jane and find a way off Asgard to the Dark World. Jane becomes ill because of the ether. Darcy finds Selvig and he explains that when Loki was in his mind, it messed with him. Selvig asks to be taken to Jane's lab. Loki seemingly betrays Thor and offers up Jane to Malekith. Malekith extracts the ether from Jane. Once extracted, Loki and Thor unite a combined assault against the ether to no avail. Malekith absorbs the ether. Upon leaving, Loki and Thor engage in battle with Malekith's men. Loki ends up sacrificing his own life to save Thor's. And then Jane receives a phone call that allows her to locate a portal back to Earth. They meet up with Selvig and Darcy through some sciencey stuff, find out that Greenwich, England is where the convergence will happen. As Malekith and Thor battle across the 9 realms, Selvig, Jane, and Darcy create something that is able to control the portals, and doing so, they send Malekith back to the Dark World where he meets his end. Thor gives a speech to Odin and tells him he is not ready for the throne. Upon leaving, Odin transforms and shows that he is secretly Loki. Sif and Volstagg appear in front of a man known as the Collector. They hand him over the ether and state that they shouldn't keep 2 Infinity Stones at Asgard, saying that the Tesseract being the other stone. In the post-credits scene, Thor returns to Earth and kisses Jane. Moving right along to Captain America, the Winter Soldier, we open up to a fun jogging scene where Cap meets Sam Wilson. They bond over their similar war experiences, and then Black Widow picks up Cap and they head off to a hostage mission. After rescuing the hostages, Cap notices that Natasha had a secret mission. He confronts Nick Fury upon returning to the base. Nick Fury shows Cap the 3 helicarriers that they're building. Cap says that it isn't freedom, it's fear. Fury tells him to get with the times. Cap visits a museum in memorabilia of his World War II days. He visits Peggy to help him feel better, however she has dementia. Fury meets with Alexander Pierce about some concerns about Project Insight. Meanwhile, Cap shows up at Sam's work and they share similar stories. Nick Fury gets attacked by the Winter Soldier but manages to escape. Upon returning to his house, Steve notices Fury in his home. Fury gets shot through the wall, and as he dies, he tells Cap not to trust anyone. Agent 13, who is Cap's neighbor, also shows up. Cap chased after the Winter Soldier, but he escapes. At the hospital, Cap leaves behind a flash drive that Fury gave him. Pierce talks to Cap about why Fury was in Cap's apartment, and then Cap gets attacked in the elevator. He makes his escape and then heads back to the hospital for the flash drive when Widow surprises him. Widow explains that the Winter Soldier is who killed Nick Fury. The Council calls to start up Project Insight. Widow and Cap find out that the flash drive originated in New Jersey. Upon arriving at the camp that Cap was trained in, they find out that this was where S.H.I.E.L.D. was started. They find an old computer system that is actually Ivan Zolo. Zolo explains that S.H.I.E.L.D. is actually Hydra, and that Hydra ended up killing Fury, Howard Stark, and many more. Zolo states that he was stalling and that they are about to be bombed. After barely surviving the explosion, they make their way to Sam's house. Pierce meets with the Winter Soldier and sends him to kill Cap and Widow. Sam tells Cap that he wants to join their cause. He shows him that he has this tech which allows him to fly with metal wings. Cap interrogated a S.H.I.E.L.D. operative into telling him about Zolo's algorithm and how it works, saying how the helicarriers are going to be used to kill millions of people by predicting their future. The Winter Soldier and S.H.I.E.L.D. then attack our heroes. During the attack, we find out that the Winter Soldier is actually Bucky. The Winter Soldier escapes, but Cap, Widow, and Sam are all captured. Agent Hill rescues them and takes them to a hideout where Nick Fury is alive and not so well. Pierce erases the Winter Soldier's mind. Cap takes his old suit from the museum and they prepare to take the battle to S.H.I.E.L.D. Cap gets on the intercom and tells everyone the truth. This causes a large amount of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents to work with them. The helicarriers get launched into the air. Widow puts Pierce under gunpoint and then puts all of the S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra records on the internet for everyone to see. Falcon disables the first helicarrier. Pierce tries to convince Fury of his ways, but it doesn't work. Bucky shows up and gets rid of Falcon's wings. Bucky is guarding the last helicarrier. Cap and him square off. Cap is barely able to disable the last helicarrier, and the helicarriers destroy each other. Fury then kills Pierce. Sam fights Brock until the building begins to collapse. Sam escapes, but Brock is crushed and burned. Cap noticed that Bucky is trapped. He tries to save him. They continue to fight as Cap tries to make Bucky remember. Bucky then saves Cap from drowning and brings him to the shore, then leaves. Fury then burns all of his old stuff. Widow says that she is going to lay low, and Cap and Falcon decide to go look for Bucky. In the post-credit scene, we see a cool little teaser for Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. In the post-credits, we are with Bucky at the museum finding out who he really is. Alright, now we're going to move on to Avengers Age of Ultron. I just feel like it goes better this way. I know that Guardians technically existed before this, but we're just going to keep going with Avengers Age of Ultron. It's actually really nice because we start off exactly where the Winter Soldier left off. Stryker and the Maximoff twins have the scepter and are held up in a secret base in Sokovia. The Avengers attack the base, defeat Stryker, and retrieve the scepter. Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver give them a few issues, but ultimately escape unnoticed and unharmed. However, Clint is harmed, and Widow is now the thing that can bring Banner back from the Hulk. Upon returning with the scepter, Clint is all healed up, and Tony notices that the stone that Stryker was working on in the scepter is potentially artificial intelligence, and that he wants to start the Ultron program. While at a party, Ultron comes to life and kills Jarvis. It's at this point that we get a little background info on some of the characters. Sam is still looking for Bucky, Jane has become the world's most notable astronomer, and Pepper is off running Stark Industries. And we find out that Banner and Widow have a potential romance brewing. After the party begins to die down, Ultron appears in front of them and attacks them and steals the scepter. The twins meet up with Ultron, and Quicksilver explains that when they were children, their parents were killed by a Stark bombing. Ultron says that he plans to make the Avengers pay. Tony decides to look for Ulysses Klaue, a man who was branded by the Wakandans for being a thief. However, Ultron makes it to him first and gets the vibranium from Klaue and then cuts off his arm. The Avengers show and start a full-fledged battle. Cap, Widow, and Thor all get brainwashed, and we see terrible visions of their fears. After Iron Man defeats Ultron's body, he notices that the Hulk has started attacking the nearest town. Iron Man calls in the Hulkbuster armor, and after much destruction is able to subdue the Hulk. After this, Hawkeye takes them to his house with his wife and kids. Thor takes off to look for answers. Heather, the doctor that fixed Hawkeye earlier, is cornered by Ultron and forced into making a body of vibranium for Ultron. Nick Fury shows up and helps the Avengers utilize Ultron's plan. Ultron then takes the Infinity Stone inside the scepter and infuses it into the vibranium body. Thor, using some kind of weird magic thing, enters back into his dream where he sees a collage of all the Infinity Stones that have been discovered this far. We also see a small little cameo from Eric Selvig. The twins find out what Ultron truly plans to do, and they leave. Ultron then tries to escape from the facility, but while Cap and the twins hold Ultron off, Hawkeye and Widow secure the body. Upon returning, Tony convinces Banner to put Jarvis, who is not dead apparently, into the body instead of Ultron. Man, that's like a Phase 2 just thing, you know? They think somebody's dead, but they're not actually dead. Meanwhile, Widow wakes up after being captured by Ultron, and she sends signals to Hawkeye so that they know their location. Cap and the twins show up to stop Tony and Banner. Then as they fight, Thor busts in and overloads the body's casket, and it causes him to come to life. His name is Vision, and he is neither Ultron nor Jarvis. Thor speaks of the Mind Stone as one of the 6 Infinity Stones that are beyond power itself. Vision picks up Thor's hammer, and they decide they can trust him. The Avengers start to evacuate the city. Banner saves Widow. Ultron's army begins to assemble, and full-on war breaks out. Vision disconnects Ultron from the internet, and Ultron starts his plan. The city begins to rise, and Ultron explains that Sokovia is going to be the meteor that causes global extinction. Widow brings out the Hulk. Hawkeye gives Scarlet Witch a pep talk, and Fury shows up with War Machine, and yes, he's War Machine again. They have a helicarrier to escort the remaining civilians. Ultron's army begins to converge at the core to drop the city, but the Avengers all show up to protect it. Quicksilver dies while protecting Hawkeye. With a combined assault, Thor and Iron Man end up destroying the city before it makes contact with the ground, and upon leaving, Hulk gets in a Quinjet and goes off-world. And Vision has a conversation with the last remaining Ultron. Ultron says that humanity is doomed. Vision agrees and then destroys Ultron. Clint returns to his family. Tony opens up a new Avengers facility in upstate New York. Thor states that he needs to find out why the Infinity Stones are popping up, and Cap is in charge of the new Avengers. In the post-credits scene, we see Thanos grab a hold of a gauntlet and say, "I'll do it myself." Now we're going to make our way into Guardians of the Galaxy. The Guardians drops into 1988, where Peter Quill witnesses his mother's death. It is as he runs away from the scene that he is abducted by Yondu. In present day, we see Peter dance his way to an Infinity Stone, and after retrieving it, gets into a fight with Yondu, where Yondu gets angry and puts a bounty on Peter. We meet Ronan the Accuser. Ronan has made a deal with Thanos to get the Infinity Stone. He sends Gamora, daughter of Thanos, to retrieve the stone from Xandar. Nebula, the second daughter of Thanos, declares that she is a better fit for the mission, but Ronan denies her. We meet Rocket Raccoon and Groot, two bounty hunters who are able to hunt Peter after the broker backs out of the deal after hearing Ronan's name. Groot, Rocket, Gamora, and Peter all get arrested. At the jail, Gamora gets cornered by Drax the Destroyer on a revenge mission. Peter convinces him to let her live. He then convinces Rocket and Gamora to work together to escape the prison. Rocket turns off the gravity and the Guardians escape the prison using Peter's ship after he retrieves the tape player that his mother gave him. The Guardians make their way to Gamora's byre on a dangerous planet where we find that Thanos has tortured her countless times and molded her into an ultimate killing machine. We find out that Gamora's buyer is the Collector. While negotiating the deal, the Collector explains that the Infinity Stones existed before the universe and were split up into 6 stones that each contain their own reality. Drax calls Ronan to their location. After everyone is defeated and Nebula takes the stone, Quill sacrifices himself to Yondu to save Gamora. Groot, Drax, and Rocket decide to save Peter and Gamora from Yondu. Ronan, upon realizing it is an Infinity Stone, betrays Thanos, and Yondu and Peter make a deal to attack Ronan and pick up the rest of the Guardians on the way. With the help of the Nova Corps, the Guardians minus Rocket make their way into Ronan's ship. Gamora defeats Nebula and Rocket crashes his ship into Ronan, causing Ronan's ship to begin to crash onto Nova Prime. Groot sacrifices himself to save the others as they crash into the planet. Ronan survives the crash, and before he can destroy Nova Prime, Peter distracts him so that Drax can destroy his weapon that holds the Infinity Stone. Peter grabs a hold of the Infinity Stone, and as it begins to kill him, the other 3 Guardians grab a hold of it and share the power and burden between themselves. Peter, with the power of the stone, destroys Ronan and then contains the power within another orb. Yondu shows up and takes it, then states how Peter turned out okay and it was good that they didn't deliver him to his dad like they were instructed to when they kidnapped him as a kid. Peter laughs because he switched the stones and they end up giving it to the Nova Corps, and thanks, the Nova Corps restores Peter's ship and deletes their criminal records. We also see that Groot is restored in a smaller plant-like form. There's also a stupid Howard the Duck end credits, but I doubt that matters to any of this. And then last but not least, we are on to Ant-Man. We get thrown back into the 80s at the start of this one to see Dr. Hank Pym put in his resignation with Howard Stark and Peggy Carter and Mitchell, the heads of S.H.I.E.L.D. Back in the present day, we see Scott Lang getting out of prison when his former cellmate Luis picks him up and takes him to San Fran. Darren Cross, the new head of Pym Industries, invites Hank Pym to an unveiling where he introduces the Yellow Jacket, a shrinkable suit that allows one increased strength but smaller mass. Pym is not happy about this new technology. Hope, Hank's daughter, tries to convince him and have him join, but Hank has something else in mind. Scott visits his daughter but was kicked out of the house. Darren then murders someone who earlier disagreed with him. Upon returning to Luis, he starts another thieving job, only to find out that the house that he breaks into was Hank Pym's, and Hank Pym watches him from an ant camera. Scott steals the Ant-Man suit. Scott discovers that the Ant-Man suit allows him to shrink himself. Upon trying to return the suit, he gets arrested. Hank Pym gives him a way out. Hank convinces Scott to break into Mitchell's base and steal the Yellow Jacket suit and destroy all the data. Hope wants to use the suit for herself, but Hank denies her. Hope then trains Scott on how to better use the suit. We find out that Hank's wife used to be the Wasp, and she sacrificed herself in order to save the lives of millions by going subatomic. Later, Scott goes to retrieve some tech from Avengers base. He runs into Sam Wilson, and cleverly he's able to get the tech and avoid Sam. Darren arrives at Hank's house, inviting him to his presentation. Hank accepts, but Darren is upset, so he tripled security. This forces Scott to bring Luis and his other 2 friends on the job. Darren is one step ahead of everyone when he traps Scott in a little tube and Hank in a room with former Hydra members. Just as he's about to kill Hank, Scott busts out and saves him. However, Hank does get shot. Darren flees with the Yellow Jacket suit and Mitchell flees with the Pym particle. Scott heads after Darren. Hank grows a keychain tank to real size and busts out of the facility. Scott gets pissed when Darren kills his ant buddy. The charges go off and Darren's entire lab is destroyed. Darren puts on the yellow jacket suit and they begin their immensely entertaining fight. After seemingly defeating Darren, Scott gets arrested again. Darren escapes and makes his way to Scott's daughter Cassie's house. Scott shows up to save her and they begin round 2 of their entertaining brawl. Scott sacrifices himself by going subatomic to stop Darren and save Cassie. Upon hearing Cassie's call to him, he uses a size grower tool and is able to grow back to normal size. Scott and Hope have a moment that Hank accidentally sees. Later, Louise tells a story of how Sam was looking to recruit Antman in the Avengers. In the post-credit scene, Hank shows Hope the new Wasp suit and says it was made for her. Well, there you go, guys. That was all that happened. That was the full rundown of Phase 2. Tomorrow, we're setting up Phase 3, so keep your eyes out for that one. Until then, we'll see you guys tomorrow.